From Jon Jones being the youngest light heavyweight champion in the world to being labeled a worthless, cheating steroid rat by Mark Hunt in an expletive-filled rant, let's talk about the MMA legend unleashing on Jon Jones after the UFC 285 fight. Starting off, Mark Hunt is not a fan of Jon Jones. UFC 285 came with Jon Bones Jones once again proving to the entire world that he was a world champion, the GOAT. He defeated Cyril Gane in his heavyweight debut after a 3-year hiatus. He impressed everyone except for Mark Hunt. Mark is now retired from MMA and is remembered for his world knockout wins against Frank Mir, Antonio Bigfoot Silva, Derek Lewis, and Roy Nelson. Jon's performance didn't faze the former UFC heavyweight title challenger at all. Because of his history with performance-enhancing drugs, the combat sports veteran launched an astonishing series of attacks on social media on the 35-year-old, reminding the world of the Bones history of failing drug tests and getting arrested. To say that Mark's strict on steroid use in UFC would be an understatement, so it shouldn't come off as a shock when he was bothered by Jones and his highly promoted return to action. He wrote on Facebook, "The UFC heavyweight champion of the world, ladies and gentlemen. There you have it. A cheating steroid rat who runs on pregnant women and runs off a rat that hides under the octagon for 10 hours, hiding from being tested for drugs." The former heavyweight contender even labeled Jon Jones a worthless champion, saying that if it was any other sport, this loser wouldn't be here. Even before Jon versus Gane fight, he took to social media to launch a long verbal attack on Bones and the promotion as a whole. But what did Bones do that was so terrible? Well, Jon Jones' history with drugs and getting arrested is pretty well known. The American fighter is certainly no stranger to getting in trouble with the law throughout his outstanding career, and he's been reminded of his dark past on multiple occasions. The current champ was involved in a hit-and-run car accident in which he left a pregnant woman with a broken arm, and also steroids, pills, and performance-enhancing pills. His drug use got so bad that he was suspended from the UFC and stripped of his title. The 35-year-old ended up apologizing and made his return to the UFC in a fashionable way by becoming the heavyweight champion. He amazed everyone with his performance, except Mark, who not only unloaded on him, but didn't even spare the UFC with his outburst, saying that the UFC has no credibility because they promote this garbage. Mark puts UFC's feet to the fire after its most recent event. Mark is a strong advocate for keeping MMA clean from drugs, so it wasn't surprising when he questioned the legitimacy of the organization for promoting someone like Jon Jones, who, when recently signing a new contract with UFC, became the second highest paid fighter on their roster. In his Facebook post, the Super Samoan bashed the UFC and questioned their legitimacy. He taunted the promotion, urging everyone to raise their glasses to a company that has zero credibility. The 48-year-old even called UFC a worthless ripoff company with a worthless belt and champion, referring to Jon Jones. He's certainly not sugarcoating anything. There had been no wrongdoing by any fighter or the company recently. So what exactly was the reason behind Mark's outburst? Hunt's rocky history with the MMA started with his match against Brock Lesnar. Hunt was a member of the UFC roster from 2010 to 2018, and he didn't have the smoothest relationship with the organization both before and after his exit. I mean, he's been at odds with UFC since 2017. This is when he filed a RICO lawsuit against the promotion, its president Dana White, and his opponent at UFC 200, Brock Lesnar. In the lawsuit, the fighter claimed that UFC intentionally covered up the results of Lesnar's drug test and allowed the WWE star to fight, despite testing positive for banned substances, not just before, but after the event as well. The UFC waived their normal doping protocols for Lesnar as an athlete joining their USADA testing pool. Brock won the bout by unanimous decision, a result overturned to a no contest after USADA revealed that the winner tested positive for a banned banned substance, anti-estrogen agent hydrochloroquine, during a pre-fight drug test, and also in samples collected after the fight. It didn't take long for the war of words between the two heavyweight contenders to go from professionally combative to personal. The Samoan-Australian mixed martial artist was furious about the situation, and he obviously wasn't going to stay quiet about it. Speaking to UFC Fight Week on Fox Sports, he accused Lesnar of being on steroids and protested against the drug testing exemption given to his opponent. The 48-year-old said it wasn't a good move, and Lesnar shouldn't get a 4-month exemption, otherwise everyone else should. In an explosive interview on the MMA Hour, he unloaded on his opponent and the UFC, criticizing the organization for allowing Lesnar to fight despite the WWE superstar failing 2 drug tests and not doing enough to combat the use of performance-enhancing drugs in mixed martial arts. He believed that the UFC should ban these cheaters for a good 5 to 10 years, so they can learn their lesson. Hunt criticized Lesnar, calling him a dirty, scummy, cheating scum, and referring to him as a gimp. Yikes. He also urged fighters to form an association and pointed out that it was the 3rd time he fought an opponent in the UFC, only for them to fail a subsequent fight-related drug test. He encountered similar situations with Antonio Bigfoot Silva and Frank Mir. So, what became of Mark's lawsuit? The Superman Samoan's lawsuit was actually dismissed. After following his loss to Lesnar, Mark made it clear to the UFC that he had enough of fighting potential cheaters without compensation. Sadly, Hunt's long-standing legal dispute was dismissed in Nevada court in February 2019. The final charge of breach of the implied covenant of fair dealing and good faith was dismissed in November of the same year. It was also revealed that the former heavyweight contender dealt with another blow in March 2020 when he was ordered to pay the UFC a whopping $388,235 in attorney fees and cost. Mark appealed the dismissal of his lawsuit, reviving his claims over fraud. But even as Hunt's legal battle continues, it seems like he had already sealed his fate in MMA. Mark hasn't fought since he wrapped up his UFC contract with a unanimous decision loss to Justin Willis in late 2018. The 48-year-old also said he has lost the passion for fighting after battling with UFC in court. Sadly, it seems that's the way how his career is going to end. But there was one more instance of him speaking out against the UFC, like his comments about the fight against Sonny. Much like Michael Bisping, Mark has made something of a career out of fighting people who have either failed drug tests or found guilty over potential PED use. In November 2022, he lashed out at the UFC in a profanity-laced rant ahead of his upcoming heavyweight boxing match against Sonny Bill Williams. The combat sports veteran, speaking on his personal experiences of dealing with the UFC, said in a pre-fight presser that he had a history of fighting with people influenced by drugs. The UFC would try to silence him, but he'll continue to speak out. Well, there you have it. That was everything about Mark Hunt unleashing on Jon Jones after UFC 285.
They're cheaters in the end. That's basically all they are. They should get nothing. I used to respect Jon Jones before this.